I saw this today on the news feed on YouTube, and I found it quite funny. You know, the Nigel Farage sang anti-Semitic songs to Jewish classmates, former Dulwich pupil claims. I found it quite humorous. You know, I don't know how old Nigel Farage is, but I'm sure it's been a few years since he was at school for anyone to be really concerned about what he done when he was a schoolboy. You know, it's really kind of scraping the barrel stuff. I don't keep up with politics, so to be fair, I'm embarrassed to admit I really don't have a clue who fuck Nigel Farage is. I know he's involved in politics in some way, but I'm a total dunce when it comes to any of that stuff because I'm simply not interested, to be honest. But it made me laugh because it made me think about my own targeting and when they came into my house. And they showed me all these videos from throughout my life. Now, like I've said in the past, I believe that my parents were targeted, and the target just kind of followed on. They were gathering evidence about me and my brother at the same time, as well as actively targeting us as we were children and when my parents were alive, as we were growing up, kind of thing. So they'd been filming like lots and lots of collecting all this evidence from throughout my life they managed to throw it at me when I was 42 a few years ago. But some of the clips that they showed me, when they came in and they roofied me, the police, etc., when they drugged me, and I think about some of them sometimes, and they do make me laugh. They shouldn't make me laugh, but I do find it quite humorous. It was kind of some of the kind of really scraping the barrel stuff, and one of them was they had a photograph of a wall that I'd wrote my name on in Tippex, and I believe I was either 6 or 7 years old. I'd found a bottle of Tippex in the street, and I'd wrote my name on a wall, and one of them, one of this network of weirdos, had had gone and taken a photograph of this to keep it as evidence. They'd kept it for over 30 years to to then show me when I was in my 40s that I'd done this when I was a 6-year-old kid. Another thing that they used was I went to a birthday party of a little girl who was the daughter of one of my mum's friends. They were a pair of cunts, her parents. But she was the daughter of one of my mum's friends, and I went to her birthday party, and I got overexcited, and I'd obviously had too much sugar, and I got I kind of got a wee bit overexcited with myself. And when it's people's birthdays, you give them what's called the birthday bumps, so you kind of hit their back for the number of times of their age, And I got a bit overexcited and I thumped her a bit too hard, and other people were doing it as well, and I just got a wee bit carried away, in the moment I was a wee bit hyper. And they kind of used that as well. Oh, you made her cry, you made a kid cry. I was about 7 or 8 when that happened, so, they used that as evidence as well, that when I was a 7 or 8-year-old child, I'd made another child cry by hitting her too. There was no maliciousness in it. I was just fucking an overexcited little kid, I just got swept away in the moment. But again, it kind of made me laugh, that you're going 30 plus years on and you're using this as evidence about what a terrible person I am. Look, we have evidence. Look, we have evidence. Another bit that they used that was kind of more recent, and they'd used my child, or seemingly my child, in it. And I'd been drunk at one point. This was not long before that they'd come into my house and doing this. So I'd been drunk one day out in the street. I never had any children with me. But I'd been out and I'd come across this guy that I worked with. I'd walked past his house. His name is Kevin Winters, and I worked with him at a company called Gist, Gist, in Cumbernauld. They told me afterwards that he was involved in that. They had photos of him as they were going through my bins when I was out at work during the day, and he was stood there at my front garden, etc. There was lots of people from this company that were kind of a part of this network that I didn't know at the time. But anyway, I was drunk and I was out and walking about. I think I'd gone to the shop or something, and I walked past his house, and he's like, come in and have a chat, and we went in and we kind of chatted, and then he said, I'll walk you home, and he was walking behind. Obviously I didn't know because I'd had a drink, and I'm walking in front, he's walking behind me. Either he tripped me up or I tripped up, and he's walking behind me filming. I didn't realise at the time that he's walking behind me filming, but then when they came into my house, they showed me this film of me falling about the street drunk. But what they'd done is they'd got Derek Gourlay, or Gourlay, I don't know how you say his name, but he was a neighbour. He lived behind me at 4C Ellisland Road, and he was the main kind of person that was orchestrating the break-ins to my house, and he was stealing my mail. The Royal Mail, the postman was giving my mail to his property, and he was kind of keeping an eye on me. His window faced into my house, So he was basically orchestrating the people that were breaking into my house every day. That was his role in it, you know. He told me at the time, when after they showed me all these videos, and he said, I'll be watching you, and I said, you have to go to work sometime, and he laughed at me, and he said, this is my job, you know. So I didn't realise what he meant at the time, but I obviously know now that that's what he does, a gangstalker. I made a short about him, and then when I made the short, his picture was on his LinkedIn page. And then when I went back a couple of days later and looked, he deleted the photo from it. So he's obviously still keeping an eye on what I'm doing, you know. Or people in that network let him know that I'd put his picture online. So they're all obviously very invested still in what it is that I'm doing and what I'm saying, etc. But anyway, they'd taken a doll's pram that my child had, one of my children had when they were a toddler. They'd taken this from my house. They had Derek Gourlay's child, his son, dressed in an all-in-one kind of snowsuit, rain suit, that again had belonged to my child, that they'd taken from my house, or they'd bought, you know, one similar to what my child had when they were a toddler, when they were Derek Gourlay's child's age, which was about 2 or so at the time. And they had Derek Gourlay's child pushing my child's, wearing a snowsuit that my child had owned, pushing a doll's pram that my child had owned, and they'd spliced the two videos together. So they had the video that Kevin Winters had filmed of me falling about the street drunk, and then they had Derek Gourlay's child pushing this pram, making it seem as though I was out wandering the streets with a toddler. This was my behaviour at all times, you know, that I was a pisshead. I was a pisshead, I was a drunk, you know. I certainly wasn't falling about the streets drunk with any children in tow. That never fucking happened whatsoever, you know. That's just a fantasy invention of theirs. But they like to go with this narrative to tell other people, look what she did, look what she was doing to her children. Absolute bullshit. It never happened. But they had these two videos spliced together as though that was me with my child and I was falling about the streets drunk. What a disgrace I was, you know. And they showed me this as part of these videos, you know, and Derek Gourlay was there at the time, and it was only because in the video his son's, the hood of the suit that he was wearing fell down. Now, his child had blonde, it's in his pictures on his Facebook page, is a photo of his child, and his son has blonde, straight hair. Now, my child's hair was completely different to that. My child had very distinctive hair, and the hood came down, and I said, that's not my child, look at the hair. And he got really angry, you know, that even in my roofied state, even in the fact that they'd fucking drugged me and had me in this terrified state, all these people surrounding me, you know, and he got really angry and he was going, that is your child, shut up, shut up, shut up, that is your child. You know, really fucking annoyed that I'd seen through it. So even in the state that I was in, I could see that they'd fucking edited these clips. They also had they'd taken photos of both my children, and they'd edited like bruises onto the one of my kids when they were looked after by a childminder. The childminder's child had bit my child on the face, and my child had visible teeth marks on their face. And then someone had taken, maybe I'd taken a picture of my child just in, you know, I don't know, just because I would take pictures of her, and the teeth marks, the bruise was still kind of visible, and they kind of said it in such a way, they put this up on the screen and said, you know, it made out as though I'd bit her, like I would bite my fucking child right on the face, you know, for everyone to see, and then proudly walk about the streets for all to see my abuse, you know. I think if I was going to bite any children, if I was that way inclined, I would, you know, I'm an intelligent enough person that I would do it somewhere where it wouldn't fucking show, you know. But they, again, normal bruises that my kids had, you know, if they fell at all, and they had these pictures and they'd edited them to make them look a hell of a lot worse than they were. And again, it attributed that to me being a fucking a child beater and abuser, that I was beating and bruising my children, you know. I mean, social services had never ever been involved in my children's life, so I don't know where it is that they got this fucking fantasy role playing from, but that's kind of what they use. But this Nigel Farage thing, that just reminded me of it, you know, the way that they'll dig around in your past, and they've been obviously on my case since it was actually before that. There were actually clips of me and my brother, and I was only a toddler at the time, but they had clips of those. We were at the window and we had no clothes on in a house that we lived in before we moved to Cumbernauld. And the two of us as toddlers, or as kids, we used to share a room, but I was only 2 or 3 in this video that I had, and it was the two of us, me and my brother, standing at the window naked, and someone from outside the window had taken this video, and they actually had that as well, which is interesting, the type of people that are filming naked children. I mean, why children would be standing at a window naked, you have to kind of ask yourself a question about that, about what kind of thing is going on in those children's lives, why they're standing at a fucking window naked, don't you? But anyway, that's by the by, isn't it? I'm sure the people who were taking the video knew exactly why we were standing there naked, the fire brigade neighbours. Anyway, so say enough about that. Don't want anyone to accuse me of fucking slander or anything, Trevor. Anyway, take care. God bless. Lots of love.